Hi, everybody, and welcome to MHE's webinar on the European semester. I will start by giving you some housekeeping rules. I think that most of you might know me, but for those that I have not encountered yet, I'm Claudia Marinetti, and I am the director at Mental Health Europe. This webinar is recorded and it will be shared on our website for people that are not able to join. It's a resource that you are welcome to use at any time and also to share with people that you think might be interested. It's open to members and non-members, and the focus, of course, it's on mental health, but it can really apply to other areas, and it's an opportunity to identify also chances to collaborate with other NGOs or with other stakeholders attending this webinar. Please do interact, ask questions, or make statements. There are really no bad questions that you can ask. The way in which you can do that, you can either raise your hand on the panel that you will see on the webinar box, and in that case, we are gonna turn on your microphone. You're gonna unmute you, and you can ask your question in person. Or there are two boxes that you can use. One is called questions. The other one is called chat. And there you can type your questions. We will see them, and then we will address them at the moment when we have question and answer sessions. And of course, if something isn't clear, please do ask for clarifications. The webinar should last about 1.5 hours. And it is actually great that today we have all of our speakers here in person. It also means that you might hear some shuffling of chairs when we move from one speaker to the other. And the last thing is that, well, sorry in advance if there is any minor technical issue, but it may sometimes happen with webinars. I will just give you now a very short introduction to Mental Health Europe for those of you who are not necessarily 100% knowledgeable about what we do, and then I'll show you what is the agenda for the day and give you really just a few words on the semester and its importance before passing to our first speaker. So Mental Health Europe is a European non-governmental network organization. We work for the promotion of positive mental health, for the prevention of mental distress, and for the improvement of care. We really advocate for the social inclusion and the rights of users or ex-users of mental health services, persons with psychosocial disabilities, their families, and carers. And we also work very much on raise awareness to end mental health stigma. We have been working for more than 30 years. We have 73 member organizations across 30 different countries. We do various activities. We work very much from a human rights perspective. We work on understanding mental health, on recovery and community-based services. We carry out some specific projects. For example, some of our latest projects focused on mental health for migrants or transparency between industry and healthcare professionals or healthcare organizations. We also work on promotion, for instance, on the promotion of mental health at work, and of course on everything that concerns social Europe. Today's agenda, we see our first speaker as Stefan Iszkowski from DG Employment, who will talk to us about understanding how the European semester works. We will then hear from Amana Ferro from the European Anti-Poverty Network and their experience in working with the European semester, and followed by Dorota Sienkiewicz from EuroHealthNet, again on how they approach their work on the European semester. And last but not least, Laura Marchetti from Mental Health Europe will talk a little bit more about how to get involved. Now, in terms of the semester, well, why is the semester important? The semester was initiated in 2010, and it was initially a cycle on economic and fiscal policy coordination within the European Union. What happened is that in 2017 there was the official launch of the European Pillar of Social Rights. The European Pillar of Social Rights is an instrument that is divided into 20 key principles that aim to provide a framework for social rights in the European Union. And although none of the principles directly covers mental health, virtually all of them have a link to mental health and, of course, to its social determinants and on the well-being of people. For instance, equal opportunities or active support to employment, work-life balance, health and safety or rights to healthcare, minimum income, etc. And additionally, there is a principle 17 that focuses on the inclusion of persons with disabilities, thus including also those with psychosocial disabilities. Now, the social pillar really puts social policies back on the EU agenda, and this has led the semester to include national social reform in its process, which was, of course, very, very important for the relevance of the semester also on our work. The semester, moreover, will also become more and more relevant as it will influence how EU funding will be spent. The European Commission is starting to discuss with each member state the operational programs, which are detailed plans on, in which the member states set out how they will spend EU money, and these discussions will start on the basis of the challenges and needs identified through the semester. But we will hear more about this a little bit later. And just to conclude, in terms of why it is important, well, we know that action on mental health and on many social issues requires an integrated approach across sectors and across countries. The European semester can be maybe a slow, but it's a steady instrument to implement reforms, including, for instance, reforms on mental health systems. For Mental Health Europe members, your voice can be heard. You can engage with the process and provide your expert input, and we will indeed talk about this later. And for the other NGOs or stakeholders that are joining us, well, we can mainstream mental health together. We can work on social determinants, and we can find synergies. So thank you for your attention so far, and I will now pass to our first speaker, and I will ask you to, Stefan, to move here so you can address our audience.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. Thank you to Mental Health Europe for this invite for this webinar. Let me, I hope I can see my presentation now, so it's always a little bit reassuring. Yeah, I work for DG Employment, that's Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Social Inclusion, in unit which deals with employment and social aspects of European semester. Our work is about coordinating the input of several DGs in the semester process. We look at it from the perspective of employment, but also education and other social policies. In this presentation, I will briefly speak about the origins, logic, and the process of the European semester. Then I will have a few slides on the European Pillar of Social Rights and how this can be included and how it has been included in the European semester. Then we'll go in some detail on the country-specific recommendations in the social domain, and finally share a few nice slides with nice messages about the delivering of Europe 2020, which is a key aspect of the semester. So the semester started as a monitoring instrument for the Europe 2020 strategy. So it is several years old now. We are nearing year 2020 when we'll need to take stock of how much has been achieved within the Europe 2020 strategy. And also we should remember the context that it started in a period of severe economic crisis, which demonstrated, among other things, the need for systematic monitoring of economic policies of the member states. If you look at the structure of the semester, you will see that member states play an important role, and this is because they, with the experience of the previous crisis, they want to be informed about the economic situation in each other member state. Initially, the stress was put on the hard fiscal indicators. It's no surprise because the situation was really grave in the area of macroeconomic and fiscal stability. There was a considerable fear of meltdown, of economic meltdown. But then, as the situation improved, we started paying also closer attention to social issues. And the other nice development, besides of semester becoming more and more social, is that it is becoming a multilateral process with various actors who are involved, and more of them are joining. So let's start with the actors involved. Obviously, there is Commission, so we provide analytical input. This is in the form of 3 economic forecasts, the annual growth survey, joint employment report, and country reports. We also do draft the first proposal of country-specific recommendations. But those recommendations, as well as the employment guidelines, which form the base for the employment and social strain of the European semester, are issued by the Council. So all member states acting together and recommending the actions for the next year or the next years to each other. So Commission provides the analytical input and also some ideas what should be done in each of the member states, but then the final say is up to the member states themselves acting in the Council. There is obviously very important role for the national government, who first feed into analysis through bilateral meeting with the Commission and also inform us about the situation in the country. So a big part of our analysis comes from the sources provided by the national governments. They also react to country reports with national reform programs. This is exactly the stage of the semester at which we are now. We published the country reports for year 2019 at the end of February, and now we are starting to receive the first national reform programs, which are a kind of response, a dialogue with the country reports. Then it's also for the governments to present stability and convergence programs, depending on whether it is in the Eurozone or outside of the Eurozone. And then another actor are social partners, who also feed into analytical work of the Commission and who should be consulted on the national reform programs. Recently, we started also engaging the civil society here on organizations like yours. Here the situation is a bit, well, we are at the beginning of this process, but we hope it can go similar way as with the social partners, even though we know that the civil society is much more diverse and not so structured as the social partners. So obviously always for administration, it is kind of bigger challenge. Then it should also be clear that there is a lot of internal coordination within the Commission, because we look at the semester from perspective of at least 3 different policy perspectives. So there is a perspective of Director General for Economic and Financial Affairs. And the other core DGs are us for the labor market and the social inclusion aspects, and the DG GROW for the conditions for economic development. So those are the 3 aspects at which the semester currently looks. It is how stable the situation in the country and in the EU as a whole is. This is the aspect of financial and fiscal stability. We look at how at the conditions in the social area. This is from labor market situation, wages, rates of employment, activity, and unemployment, through situation in education and health. And then there is also a perspective of the prospects for future economic growth, so conditions for doing business. And this is the perspective of, this is the third part, and looking forward how the economy of a given state can flourish in the next years. Then obviously this requires a lot of coordination. The central political coordination is provided by the Secretary General of the Commission. We in DG Employment coordinate various social aspects, so from various policy units within our house, but also we take inputs from sister DGs such as education and culture, health and consumer protection, justice, and home affairs. And there are also other DGs involved, like regional policy, regional and urban policy, taxation and customs, financial markets, environment, climate change, and so on and so on. And then what might be most important for your from your perspective in member states, there are in each commission representation there is 1 or 2 European semester officers who whose job is to look at the current developments in a member state, providing also connection between the semester process in the Commission and the national authorities. Then it's called semester, so sounds a bit academic. Sounds also like it creates an impression that it is like half a year at most. In fact, we are working for most of the year, so issuing the periodic forecasts 3 times a year in autumn, winter, and in spring. The autumn is focused on the EU-wide in-depth analysis, so this is annual growth survey and joint employment report. Then the winter package consists of the country-specific analysis, so the country reports, and then in the spring we have the national reform programs, and in response to those national reform programs and on the basis of the country reports which we publish in winter, the country-specific recommendations are issued at the beginning of summer in June or July. The important point is that even though it is becoming more and more social, the semester remains an instrument of economic policy monitoring. And this means that investments, which are an important part of the, is it okay? Yeah.
Sorry, just
which became an important part of the analysis in this cycle of the semester, need to be assessed not only on the basis of social impact, but also on the expected returns. Then we also have seen that as the semester progressed, that streamlining of recommendations is necessary to focus activities of the member states at the most relevant issues. And then that from our perspective, what is most important is the securing and supporting convergence between the member states. So now on the possible ways of the European Pillar of Social Rights, this has been already addressed at the beginning of our meeting today, but let me go into a bit more detail. It is a big step forward, which sketches the ambitions, the political ambitions for social cohesion and social standards in Europe. It is a political declaration by the heads of state or government from November 2017 in Gothenburg, and basically falls into three broad chapters: so equal opportunities and access to labor market, fair working conditions, and adequate and sustainable social protection. It is published as a small booklet with well, in all EU languages. The principles stretch from setting ambitions as regards the education, training, and lifelong learning, through discussing equal opportunities, the active support to employment, going on to the principles of involvement of workers and social dialogue, work-life balance, unemployment benefits, minimum income, altogether 20 principles of how we would like, how the Europeans would like their societies to function. And the semester seems to be a good instrument for monitoring where we are with regard to the pillar, so how many of those principles have been met in individual member states, and how can we improve the degree of delivery on the pillar principles. Important technical instrument for this is the social scoreboard, which is part of the joint employment report, our flag product, which we publish in a draft form in autumn, and then which is accepted with the committees representing the member states. This is why it is joint, so it is a joint report of the committees in which the national governments are represented, and the Commission services. The social scoreboard is focused on 14 indicators. Those indicators are not directly linked with the pillar principles, so you have 20 pillar principles, only 14 indicators. So there is no indicator for each principle, but in any case, we believe it helps to measure where we are with regard to the pillar principles. And we look at them from two angles. So there is a level of a given indicator. Here on this slide, you can see the early leavers from education and training, and also the change compared to the previous year. So this is about statistics and collecting data. So usually we have a lag of a year. So what we can right now, we know what the situation was in. We are starting to know what the situation was in 2018, and we can compare it to 2017. Obviously, this will feed in the 2020 European semester, but in any case, it is important that we get a grasp, a gist of where individual member states are and what has been the change, so how they are moving. And this allows us to categorize them into, at each of those indicators, into one of 7 categories. So with a very bad level and unfavorable or average change, there is a critical situation, but also with a very good level and favorable, or at least not very unfavorable change, we can say that a country is a best performer. So then you have different intermediate positions, which allows to assign a category and a color in the scoreboard too. So in one of the previous slides, to each member state. Then this analysis connected to the social scoreboard is included in the country reports, and it also guides what we are focusing when writing about individual member states. Here we have an overview of social and employment issues from the country reports of 2018 and 2019. You can see that the most popular topic has been skills, education and training. This was for practically every discussed for practically every member state, and then you see that many issues are discussed for most of the member states, so well over 14. Obviously, not everything is relevant for everyone. So, on issues like integration of people with migrant background, we discuss it for 18 member states, because for the remaining 10, the situation is not as relevant. And for employment protection legislation, labor market segmentation, there has been a growth compared to 2018. In 2019 country reports, there are 13 countries discussed. Then impact of refugee flows, it's 6. In 2019, and it was also 6 in 2018. What is probably most important, interesting for you is the healthcare and long-term care. So you can see that more attention was paid to this issue in 2019 than previously, meaning more countries were discussed with regards to this policy area. Then, based on analysis in the country reports, we have the country-specific recommendations, and again, you can see overview per policy area. Here, country-specific recommendations are, in our jargon, CSRs. Don't confuse it with corporate social responsibility. It's also, well, the same abbreviation, even though the corporate social responsibility is slightly more used. Here in this presentation and in the context of the semester, it is under recommendations. So again, you see how many areas were addressed in country-specific recommendations in 2017 and 18. I cannot show you how it is going to be in 2019 because we are still in the process of analyzing the situation, and the proposal will be ready only in the beginning of June, and then subject to discussion in the committees between the member states. But you can, in any case, you can see that just like skills and training were an important issue in the country reports, it has also been an important issue in recommendations. So in the next few slides, the next few slides will be organized by the principles of the pillar, showing how many recommendations linked to each of those principles were issued in previous years. So 20 member states received a recommendation relevant for the education, training and lifelong learning, 8 on gender equality, 9 on equal opportunities, and 10 on the active support to employment. And here you can see examples of those principles. Like improve the provision of quality, inclusive mainstream education, particularly for Roma and other disadvantaged groups. That was a recommendation for Bulgaria. There was a recommendation for Germany, improve educational outcomes and skills levels of disadvantaged groups, and so on and so on. This is the language, quite technical, of the recommendations, but trust me, the national governments who receive those recommendations understand pretty well the nuances of what we suggest that they should do. Now an overview of the second chapter of the pillar. So here you can see that as regards fair working conditions, there have been fewer recommendations. And here you can see the examples of the recommendations. And the country codes are the same as you use in internet. So NL means Netherlands, DE means Germany, EE means Estonia. Then the social protection and inclusion, again, number of recommendations, most widespread regards pensions and income in old age. This is also linked to the well, it is a very important policy area, both because of the demographic developments, the demographic aging, and growing life expectancy. It is a key for fiscal sustainability in the perspective of several decades. And the analysis in the semester is also guided by what, as a commission, we do in the area of with the aging report, which is published by the every 2 years and prepared by colleagues from Director General for Economic and Financial Affairs, and also the Pension Adequacy Report, which we do produce also every 3 years in Director General for Employment and Social Affairs. I have a feeling that I'm going slightly too long in this presentation, so I will not read out the examples of recommendations in this area. Just like last slide with this overview and the number of recommendations in the area of healthcare. In 2018, 12 member states received a recommendation dealing with healthcare. Examples of how this is phrased. And the most interesting slide in this section is on the progress of recommendations, because obviously with the semester happening every year, in country reports we assess how much has been done on the issues which were issued as recommendations in the previous cycles. So till the next year, at least 39 recommendations displayed at least some progress. So some progress is not like total addressing of what was recommended, but we need to keep in mind that we basically look at half a year, because the recommendations are issued in June, July, and then the report which assesses this progress is basically finalized by the end of the year. So meaning that there has been some progress means that the issue started to be dealt with. And then if you look at in the multi-annual perspective, so the recommendations which were issued in year between year 2014 and 2018, then 59 recommendations registered at least some progress, and the figure is even bigger if we look in the perspective since year 2011. So since semester started as a monitoring tour to deliver Europe 2020 strategy, let's have a brief look on how much we managed to deliver from this strategy. And one of the goals, targets of Europe 2020 was to lift at least 20 million people out of poverty. In the beginning, because of the crisis, the situation didn't look very well. In 2012, there were above 6 million more people at risk of poverty or social exclusion in the European Union than in the year 2008. But if we look at recent developments, the number is falling fast. And if the reduction is going to continue at the same pace as in 2017, we have a chance of achieving the target in year 2020, so already next year. Similar situation with employment rate. It went down in the crisis years, but then the recovery was pretty fast. And even if the employment rate in the Union as a whole will not be 75% in the year 2020, it will be pretty close to this number. Then the two other targets, the tertiary education attainment, so having at least 40% of the population aged 30 to 34 years with tertiary education. This target has been achieved. And the other target, reducing the incidence of early school leaving to 10%, is also very close to be achieved. It is the target is 10%, and the figure for the EU as a whole is at present, meaning 2018, because this is the data that we have, 10.6%. That's it. Thank you for your attention. Hope that I didn't bore you, and I understand that there are some questions. So the question is, what kind of indicators concerning health are included in the analysis? Here, and sorry, I wanted to reach out to have a paper copy of the report with the social scoreboard. Let me see So the main indicator that is used in the social scoreboard for this is the unmet need for medical care. It is towards the right side of the scoreboard. I think I cannot see it on the screen myself right now. The second from the right. So this is a survey indicator. So we asked it's based on the question asked to people. We hoped that there would be something more robust, but even this indicator is giving quite a good idea about how different is the situation in different member states. The second question is whether the semester will end in year 2020. We don't think so. Basically, there is a consensus between the member states that there is a point in having the semester as a monitoring tool. Obviously, there is a question: what will be the follow-up of the 2020 strategy? Whether it will be Europe 2030 or whether it will be called in a different way, and what are going to be the targets? Whether they're going to be the same of the same kind in the same areas as until now. And probably with the new commission, the semester will change a little bit, but I think that we will keep monitoring the situation for the years to come. Okay.
We turn off the microphone of Athena, so we see that you would like to take the floor. You can speak now.
Oh, sorry. It was by mistake. I just wanted to ask a question regarding the timeline. If you could just go back to the information, the timeline of the country-specific recommendation and national program.
I'll just try to
Yeah. Sorry, Athena, we could not hear the question very well. The connection was breaking. Would you be able to type it in the chat box so that we can see it? We understood it was about the timeline.
Yes, I will try to do that. Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's probably our connection.
Or you can try to repeat. It seems that now the connection is working better.
Yes, it was by mistake that I raised my hand. I didn't want to to publicly take the floor. I just wanted to ask you if you could go back to the timeline regarding the country-specific recommendations.
Let me see whether it's.
Okay. Here?
Yeah. Can you see it?
I see only you.
Oh, well, that's not as good as the timeline.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Do you have a question about the timeline, Athena?
No. It's okay now. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just turn off your mic.
Perfect.
Yeah, and Marine would like to take the floor. No? Or maybe there's a question?
Unmuted.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. Now we can.
Perfect. Hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marinetti. I'm advocacy manager at Global Health Advocates. I would like to first of all thank Mental Health Euro for this webinar. My organization haven't been engaged in the European semester, but we're considering to do so. It's quite timely and useful. Thanks a lot. I have a question to Stefan. In your presentation, you mentioned about the involvement of social partners in the process. So I'd like to know more about this, more specifically, whether the process is institutionalized, or how do you choose the partners? Is it interested for everyone? is it open for everyone who is interested, or it's more selective process, and what are the timelines? Thanks a lot.
Yes, it is pretty institutionalized. Thank you for this question. The social partners in this context mean the employers and employees. So there are European organizations on both sides, notably the European Trade Union Confederation at the side of employees, and Business Europe as the main social partner at the side of employers. There are also other organizations which have a status of European social partner. They usually gather the national organizations on one or work with civil society. And here again, there are organizations at the European level from different focus on different policy areas. You will see them in a moment. The representatives of those organizations, you will see them in the moment. And also Mental Health Europe is one of those civil society partners. There is not as much formal structure for working with civil society, but there is a clear commitment to do that.
Last question.
Now reading the question, you showed that there has been a decline in the percentage of CSR, showing some progress. No, there hasn't been a decline in the percentage of CSR showing some progress. It is simply that there is different. Let me try to go to that slide. Yeah, oh yeah, good. Here it is. Yeah. So this shows that if we look at half a year, basically half a year later, after the recommendations were issued, there are fewer recommendations on which there has been some progress than if we look at all recommendations from the 5 years or 8 years. This is what, if I got the question right, this is what what the question was about. It is the basically increasing share of recommendations receiving some progress, if not only the last year, but all previous years are taken into consideration.
Thank you, and we will take question later. Now, okay, thank you very much, Stefan. If there are other questions, of course, you can always address them to us, and we will forward them to the right speakers later on.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amana Ferro. I work for the European Anti-Poverty Network. First of all, thank you, Mental Health Europe, for having us here today to share from our experience of working with the European semester. Just in a few words, for those who might not know, the European Anti-Poverty Network, we've been around for nearly 30 years, since the beginning of the 90s, since 1990 actually, and we are the largest European network of national anti-poverty groups and organizations. We are present in 31 countries, the member states of the European Union, all of them except Slovenia at the moment, as well as Iceland, Norway, Serbia, and Macedonia. And we also have 13 European organizations in our membership, such as the European Federation, the International Federation of Social Workers, Eurodiaconia, the Age Platform Europe, EuroChild, France, Salvation Army, and others. So together we stand for about 10,000 non-governmental organizations across Europe. We have been engaging not just with the European semester, but rather it is in EAPN's DNA to engage with national and European decision makers on policies that impact poverty and social exclusion. We've been doing this since the 90s with the poverty programs, which is actually how EAPN was born, and we've been doing it through the 2000s during the Lisbon strategy, through the social open method of coordination, getting involved with the national action plans for employment and for inclusion. So when the European semester started in 2010, for us it was just a slightly different procedure with a slightly different name of processes that have been already going on from before. I'm going to try to give you a brief overview with some best practices from our membership, from how we do this, building on Stefan's presentation before, since now hopefully the stages and the key moments of the European semester framework are a little bit more clear. Obviously, for us, these are very important processes because Europe 2020, the Europe 2020 strategy for the first time has a clear objective for reducing poverty by 20 million people compared to the baseline of 2008 by 2020. We're not exactly close to reaching that objective, but its mere existence means that it gives us a powerful lobbying tool to put pressure on both governments and European institutions to do something about the fact that 1 in 4 Europeans are currently at risk of poverty and social exclusion. And of course, with the introduction a few years ago of the European Pillar of Social Rights and its 20 principles and the scoreboard, that has given a new impetus to try to rebalance the social and economic dimensions of the European semester processes. So what do we do? What we do is, first of all, our members at national level, but also some of our European organizations, prepare what we call a poverty watch. This is an annual report, but report may be a misleading term because it can be a 2-page document, it can be a 200-page document. Each of our national networks decides how they want to do this. And it's basically a snapshot of the state of play of poverty in a specific country. What are the groups most affected? What is the situation? What are the main causes? What are some solutions in the perspective of our members? So pretty much this kind of, I mean, what's the point of being a national anti-poverty platform if you don't have a clear reference about where poverty is in your country? Sometimes we have a thematic focus, for example, on in-work poverty. We had a couple of years ago on education, on adequate minimum income schemes, but basically it's just where our members stand from their own experience and the groups that they work with on poverty and social exclusion. This constitutes the baseline, and it already comes, the analysis already comes with recommendations. So what in our members' view, governments, but also the European level, however, specifically governments, should do to reduce poverty and social exclusion in their country, in their specific context. These are drafted usually over the summer, say between June and September, because as of September, our members start feeding them into the people who draft the country reports. And the people who draft the country reports are the desk officers in the European Commission. This is why it's easy for our members to draft the reports in their own language. There's no need to do it in English. It's something that they write for themselves, that is useful for them at the national level. And there is no unified format for it. There are some guidelines, but pretty much every one of our members does what is useful for them in their context. And then they send it to the desk officers in charge of drafting the country reports, but also to the European semester officers who are stationed in Commission representations in all member states, to the media, to national governments, to other interlocutors, to the independent experts on social protection and social inclusion, to the members of the Social Protection Committee, to the Employment Committee, to all actors that they have identified as playing a part in the European semester. Equally, they distribute it through the media, traditional media, social media, and a number of them have organized key events precisely to present the findings of their country reports. Because this, of their poverty watches, I'm sorry, because precisely this analysis of the poverty watches constitutes the baseline, the analysis of the situation, which informs all input that our members then present to the specific stages of the country, of the European semester. One lesson that we've learned is that timing is extremely important. For example, 2 years ago, we submitted these poverty watches more around December, even November, December, even beginning of January, and we were told this is too late. The country reports are being drafted way earlier. So now we start this process already as of October to make sure that the input gets taken on board, or that at least it has a chance to get taken on board. Like Stefan mentioned before, the European Commission holds, after the annual growth survey, so around December, January, bilateral meetings in countries where delegations of the European Commission go and meet with the government and often with social partners and other stakeholders to discuss the annual growth survey and the priorities, which are an excellent opportunity for civil society through the European semester officer, not only to try to get engaged with these meetings and try to present the findings of their poverty watches also in these meetings, because these meetings also feed into the country reports. In the meantime, what we do at the European level, but always with the direct input of our members, is the annual growth survey comes out usually end of November. We do a quick reaction on the spot, and then we do an in-depth analysis of both the annual growth survey as well as the joint employment report throughout each of the guidelines in the employment guidelines, as well as all the Europe 2020 strategy targets that we work on. We specifically work on poverty reduction, employment and education, and also monitoring the European Pillar of Social Rights in it. So there is a lot of work of input, but also a lot of work of monitoring. And our analysis, comprehensive analysis based on members' input of the annual growth survey and the joint employment report usually comes out at the beginning of the year. In the meantime, as I said, at the national level, our members are trying to grasp every opportunity for providing feedback into the country reports. Then the country reports come out on the 27th, well, 26, 7, 8, something around there. Last year was the 7th of March, but usually 20-something of February is the date where you should be looking out for them. What we do then is we monitor. We have a 2-day policy meeting with our national members, usually towards the end of March, where we have specific sessions where we go country by country, and everybody tells us, what do you think about your country report? For example, are the targets of Europe 2020 adequately captured? Is the European of social rights in there, not just the scoreboard, but is there a comprehensive mainstreaming of the 20 principles? What about the implementation of the country-specific recommendations from the previous year? How was your input taken on board? Do you feel that the input that you have made has been incorporated in the report? Is the report more social than in previous years? All these things, we get oral feedback followed by email feedback from our members on the same things, which we put together in an assessment of the country reports, including to what extent our lobbying was successful and lessons learned. This is what we're preparing exactly this week. So in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, we will be able to actually present the final result of this. This assessment of the country reports that we do also includes proposals for alternative country-specific recommendations, which, like I said, were already elaborated at the time of the Poverty Watch. When our countries finalized their poverty watches and started feeding them around, we also asked each of our members to provide a brief summary in English, which was put together in a synthesis report at the EU level, which was also launched in the European Parliament at the kind invitation of the intergroup fighting poverty and social exclusion in the European Parliament, where desk officers and the European Commission also attended so that we could present overall key messages at the EU level and also some country examples. There were 4 countries that were present there. So we are doing now this second assessment report of the country reports, which will feature also alternative country-specific recommendations, proposals for country-specific recommendations for each country from the perspective of our members, based on the analysis in the poverty watches. Then there is a second round of bilateral meetings and fact-finding missions that happens at member states level with delegations of the European Commission, and our members also try to get involved with that and feed this time also their assessment of what they saw in the country report compared to their own analysis. Throughout this process, our members try to get engaged with the government. Sometimes it's the Prime Minister's office, the Ministry of Economic and Financial Affairs, but also the Social and Employment Ministry can be a very good entry point to try to formulate input into what is now a national level document, the National Reform Programs, which come out now, mid-April. The date is supposed to be yesterday, 15th of April, but some countries take a little bit longer. So based on the same analysis, but enriched by what came out in the country reports and our members' reaction to that, our members at the national level tried to get involved with government representatives to have input in the drafting of the country reports. Of the national reform programs. There are several ways to do this. They can send written input, which they often do. In many countries, there are consultation meetings or there are bodies set up to facilitate stakeholder participation, including civil society, in this drafting process. And some of our members have also been offered the draft prepared by the government of the national reform programs for our members to comment on. So there are many different ways, and when I get to the good practices, I will give you some of these examples more specifically. After the national reform programs, the NRPs, are issued mid-April, we pretty much do what we have done with the country reports, which means we have another meeting with our members where we go again country by country and get feedback on the national reform programs, looking specifically at the poverty reduction target, the employment target, and the education target of Europe 2020, but of course, again, at the mainstreaming of the pillar of social rights in principles, as well as scoreboard indicators in that, but also what is very important for us, civil dialogue and participation. To what extent the views of people directly experiencing poverty and exclusion on the ground and their civil society organizations has been taken on board in the drafting process. And then again, we have a written survey or questionnaire where we try to also get written input from our members, and we put together a very comprehensive report. It's usually 60 or 70 pages about the national reform programs and to what extent the policies identified in them will lead to better social results, particularly fighting poverty and exclusion, but also better and more quality employment for those who can work, better education and training, and in general, better social outcomes for everybody. In the aftermath of the national reform programs, as it was said, the Commission issues country-specific recommendations. Of course, our first action when these come out is to compare them to our own members' shadow recommendations, which have been submitted earlier in the year, namely around now. And sometimes you get very pleasant surprises. For example, our Austrian members have seen their recommendation picked up exactly verbatim in the one addressed by the European Commission. That is also not always the case. So we do a critical analysis from the point of view of poverty and social exclusion, and also from the point of view of organizations working directly on the ground in countries to fight poverty and social exclusion. To what extent are these recommendations adequate? And very often we notice that CSR number 1, which tends to be on macroeconomic issues, directly contradicts some of the more positive CSRs, more social CSRs, which are the second or the third one, because you can have a first recommendation that says you need to cut spending, and you can have a second or a third recommendation that says you need to invest more in social infrastructure. And usually it's the macroeconomic cutting one that takes priority over the other. So this is an incoherence that we have flagged up several times, and that we still hope will be taken on board. This year we're going to do something a little bit different, which is we're going to do, instead of a strictly NRP assessment report, a more comprehensive semester report to see what is happening to social rights, to poverty reduction, and to participation. Participation of civil society is very important for us as a principle. Social partners in the framework of social dialogue are consulted mandatorily at national and EU level. It's a treaty obligation. And that also means there are very serious procedures in place, there are protocols, there are guidelines about this engagement and how it functions. And it also means that they're funded specifically to carry out this work. This is not the situation with civil society organizations, at least not yet, although recital 11 of the integrated guidelines, as well as in other parts of the integrated guidelines which underpin the delivery of the European semester, specifically mention civil society as interlocutors and partners in the delivery of the European semester and the European pillar of social rights. So building on that, we're trying to make the case for civil dialogue to be included in these processes on equal footing with social dialogue. More recently, over the past, say, a year or so, there have been extremely encouraging signs from DG Employment specifically, but from Stefan and his colleagues specifically, where they have organized roundtable civil society review seminars, where civil society representatives from the ground, from different countries, are invited to have a dialogue directly with desk officers who write the country reports and who contribute to all this country analysis. So just to synthesize in a nutshell, it is important to both provide input into these processes before they happen, as well as monitor these processes once documents have come out of the European Commission or the government. The timing for this is absolutely crucial, which is why building partnerships with the European semester officer in your country, the desk officer, DG Employment, the Social Protection Committee member, the Employment Committee member, the independent expert for social protection and social inclusion in your country is absolutely fundamental, because they will give you information such as the right timeline, such as the right opportunities to provide input, facilitate access to these bilateral meetings. Like I said, our members have also organized a wide range of events on their poverty watch, on the European pillar of social rights, on the European semester overall, with the participation of the semester officer and sometimes with the desk officers as well. And obviously, you can also contact EAPN members in your own country if you go to our website, which is eapn.eu. Under our structure, our members, you will find each country has a page where you can find contact information, and you can get in touch with them, because they've been doing this for a while. I was also asked to give a few good practices, and I'm going to read a little bit now, because what we do every year is we prepare a very detailed, and I hope also brief, simple, to the point, and understandable toolkit for our members on how to engage with these processes. What are the stages, what each of the stages means, what is the timeline, what are the main interlocutors, and what can civil society on the ground do. Specifically EAPN members, but of course other organizations can learn from this. This toolkit is being finalized this week, so towards the end of the week or maximum next week, it will be ready, and it can be shared with you as well, because it's a public document. And it also includes concrete best practices from our members who have done this before. And I'm going to give you a few examples. For example, in Spain, our members send their proposals to the National Reform Program every year. And they also have interviews with the Economic Office of the government, who is drafting the NRPs, and the proposals are added to the text at the end, together with the proposals received from social partners such as trade unions. And the aspects that they focus on in the input that they provide is the evaluation of the previous national reform program, of the country report, and of the 2017 recommendation, country-specific recommendations, highlighting gaps, what is still missing, what can still be addressed, in a comparison table between their own proposals and what the government and the European Commission has put forward. And they're also, EAPN Spain, carrying out a project right now on the European Pillar of Social Rights for the Ministry of Healthcare, to raise awareness on the existence of the pillar and of the opportunities to get involved with it, to explain the scoreboard, also to make the link with the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, etc. In Poland, there is an official Europe 2020 task force, which was set up ever since 2012, to facilitate stakeholder engagement with the government, specifically on the national reform programs and other associated Europe 2020 processes, with a yearly special working meeting on poverty and with a group of civil society organizations participating, including EAPN Poland, where our members have presented their Poverty Watch report and their recommendations, and have also sent proposals and amendments to the country report and to the national reform programs. Some of their input was taken on board, some was not. At least they got an explanation on the parts that were not included and why. They also get involved with a fact-finding mission that precedes the country report through the European Semester Officer. And this provides an opportunity to talk not just to the European Commission representatives coming, but also to their own government. In Finland, they prepared, along with our other members, their own country-specific recommendation proposals, which were very widely circulated to stakeholders, together with SOSTE, the Finnish Federation for Social Affairs and Health. They're in close touch with the European Semester Officer, like I said, a very important resource, and through them, they have been invited to participate in the fact-finding mission of the European Commission. They also produced the Poverty Watch and circulated it widely to a number of stakeholders, organized events on the European Pillar of Social Rights, bringing NGOs and decision makers together, and produced publications also to raise awareness on the pillar, on the semester, and on these processes. The same in Lithuania, good contact with the European Semester Officers to discuss about the country reports and other things. They circulated their Poverty Watch to the government and received official answers from several ministries, which was also quite good. And a lot of issues from their own Poverty Watch were taken up in the country report for Lithuania. And also Lithuania presented in our European Parliament event on the Poverty Watches, and was also invited by the European Commission at their civil society review roundtable earlier this year on the country reports. Finally, EAPN Ireland, which spearheads a coalition of NGOs, which is called the Better Europe Alliance, originally funded by the European Commission to pilot cross-sectoral analysis to work on the semester. Now the funding is gone, but the enthusiasm continues. They also make submissions to the national reform program and comment on any draft that is given to them. And the Irish NRP for 2018 actually included an annex with contributions from stakeholders, which is also the practice in other countries such as France and others. And they also get engaged with the European Semester Officer, the bilateral meetings, and other meetings that happen in country, including civil society organizations and European Commission representatives, which is, however, our Irish members report better engagement actually with European structures than with their own government, a fact which is also picked up by their own country report of this year, of 2019. I spoke a little bit fast, there was a lot to cover, and I didn't want to take a lot of your time. This is, in a nutshell, and I hope not very chaotically, how EAPN tries to engage with these processes, both from an proactive input perspective as well as reactive monitoring, a little bit of a combination of both, starting from the baseline established by our own analysis in the poverty watches prepared by our members and putting forward proposals based on that, and always trying to strengthen the participatory aspect of the European semester, and specifically civil dialogue and the access of people experiencing poverty and their NGOs to these processes. And I guess I'm done, but if you have questions, I'm happy to take them.
We will now give the floor to Dorota from the from EuroHealthNet. But there will be a moment for questions for both Dorota and Amana after Dorota's presentation. So you can write them already if you have some question, and we will put them on a side so they don't get lost. But don't worry, the moment for question will come in a little bit.
Thank you. Good afternoon, morning, everyone. My name is Dorota Sienkiewicz, and echoing the speakers before me, I would like to thank the Mental Health Europe for inviting EuroHealthNet to present our work on the European semester and how we have been trying to engage our members in the process. So basically, our point in working on European semester is to look at it through a kind of lens of it being a driver for EU funding opportunities and investment priorities, and in that we focus on it delivering better for health equity across the board, and also trying to work with our members towards the process being more participatory and engaged. And kind of compared, I feel a little bit dwarfed by the EAPN presentation, because we are trying to do that with quite limited resources and capacity, because we've been obviously covering so much more than European semester, so our day, obviously. So it's a work that could easily take up the time of one full-time person working in an organization, and you know, all of us have to do it with quite limited resources, just like probably yourselves. I wanted to go through the frozen. So very quickly, just one slide on who we are, as I am aware of the fact not all of you may have heard about us. So EuroHealthNet is a not-for-profit partnership of organizations, agencies, and statutory bodies working on public health, disease prevention, and promoting health and reducing inequalities. We are present, we have members in the European Union and European region, and the numbers add up to almost 60 members. And just to give you an example, these can be national public health institutes in the countries, research institutes, universities, but also local, regional authorities, and in some cases municipalities. We support our members' work in Europe through policy and project development, knowledge and expertise exchange, research, networking, and communication activities. And our mission, as you can see it on the slide, is to basically improve and sustain health between and within European states through joint action on the social determinants of health, with a kind of ultimate goal of reducing health inequalities. And how do we do that? How do we work? You can see the picture which illustrates our kind of structure. We work around 3 interlinking platforms which focus on practice, that's the blue one, policy, that's the purple one, and research, along with additional co-member services. And in all that work, so those platforms don't work in separation, of course. We try to inject the practice, so the practice work, the good practices that the members share into the policy making, and policy making into practice back, but also practice to research and research back to practice and to policy. So it's all a kind of evolving around joint work of our members and ourselves. So now going back to the European semester, why is it important for us and our members? It's because of the nature of our work, and we operate in between, you could say, various directorate generals, so the parts of the European Commission. On the left side, you can see the focus that DG Employment and other DGs take towards the European semester that we could and do hook up to. It's the equity, combating poverty, social exclusion, and employment, but also it's education skills, early years, social determinants, the living conditions of people. It's also health and safety at work and pensions adequacy, and social protection and health and long-term care, which kind of takes us to the right side of this slide. We also work vis-a-vis the DG Santé, so the part of the European Commission responsible for health. And here you can see the underlying risk factors, I would say, for non-communicable and chronic diseases, alcohol, diet, physical activity, tobacco. But it's also the focus on health inequalities all along the social gradients, lifestyle factors, and then when we take it a little bit further to the health systems, the health systems performance assessments, and sustainable and accessible health services and long-term services. And in the center of that, which is where we see those 2 parts, and many other parts actually, interacting, is the European semester process, the European Pillar of Social Rights, you've heard about it already a lot, and the multi-annual financial framework. This is how we see it operating. It kind of evolves in between those kind of principles and EU-led driven processes that then trickle down to the national level, the EU member states. So what do we do in EuroHealthNet, or what have we already done? On an annual basis, we perform analysis of the European semester, and here you can see the last 4 years reports and our work that we delivered. We started actually a little bit earlier than 2015, but in 2015 we had a very first kind of comprehensive report called Will the 2015 country-specific recommendations contribute to health equity? And in this one, we focused on pensions, children and families, and health systems. The next one, the 2016 report, focused on, again, children and families and health systems from a health promotion perspective. The 2017 one focused on access to healthcare, early childhood education and care, and poverty and income inequalities. And the last one from last year, the 2018, focused on health and long-term care, and again, early childhood education and care, poverty and income inequalities, skills, education, and labor market participation. So you can see that we address health through a variety of social determinants of health opportunities and outcomes. You can see here that in all of those reports, we have been looking at the process through a health equity lens. Every year we provide evidence-based recommendations that are based on our in-house analysis. We have it always checked with our members in a variety of member states, and it's to support the Commission work in the draft of the different semesters packages, and also to support our members' work on the ground vis-a-vis their governments, wherever, whenever it's appropriate, because it's not always the case. Each year we try to diversify the countries we focus on and that we analyze. As well, we try to look into a slightly different thematic angle that we could add, but health, access to healthcare, health systems, health promotion, and reducing health inequalities is always included in it. This annual analysis exercise, as I already mentioned, is always done with the engagement of our members and also in collaboration with other stakeholders. So I will try to give you here a couple of examples of where our members and how our members are engaged throughout the European semester process. So, for example, the National Public Health Institute in Slovenia has been engaged actually in the process from quite early on. They follow the country-specific recommendations regularly and use these potential opportunities for health promotion arising from the directions given in the semester process. Actually, our members in Slovenia said that the country-specific recommendations were one of the key drivers for the Ministry of Health to make healthy aging a priority, and also for our Slovenian members to enable them to strengthen the integrated strategies and actions for healthy and active aging, and focusing on the long-term care within the framework of the Europe 2020 strategy, the semester process, and the social investment package. And Amana has already mentioned a number of opportunities that the European Commission has started introducing into the European semester process. So, for example, in October last year, our Slovenian member was invited to play an expert role in the European Commission semester seminar reflecting the civil society's experience in working with the process, where they said that, and you can see here a quote, they said that health and long-term care have had more prominence in the European semester more recently. That's what they see in their national work, which allowed us to build more forms of cooperation at national level. It is not always easy to influence at national level due to short policy cycles. But the semester process can provide a longer time frame for national policy development that can be hooked onto. And sectors other than health and long-term care are seen to be more sensitive to country-specific recommendations as they are linked to funding. And I will come back to this point a little bit later, the funding issue. Our another member, based in Finland, SOSTE, Social and Health Association, which is the same member as Amana already mentioned, has also been involved in the process through its collaboration with the European Commission representation in Finland, with the country desk office. And they also told us that they produce a shadow report with recommendation based on the country report for Finland for a given year, and they publish it at the same time as the European Commission's country-specific recommendations. And our Finnish expert said that the NGOs have a significant role in service delivery in Finland. One of the CSRs asks Finland to ensure the adoption and implementation of a big reform on health and social policy. That's actually the one that has just failed to go through. Many academics, service users and municipalities in Finland, however, strongly oppose the proposed reform, believing it will not lead to more cost-effective and integrated services. And they say that whilst a reform of the present model is needed, there are big differences on what the new model should be. And SOSTE is very involved with the semester delegation from the European Commission. In general, the semester process is not known by the general public, and media coverage focuses mostly on economic issues. So this kind of illustrates the need for NGOs and non, I'd say, economic issues concerned organizations to be involved in the process, to give it a little bit a slightly different angle to what and how it's understood and dealt with at national level, but also at the EU level. We have also been working with our member organization in Sweden. You can see it here, SALA, Association of Local Authorities and Regions, but also our member HGZ Nederland, based in the Netherlands, which I think is a kind of an interesting tweak onto for all of you who are concerned mostly with the mental health issues. In the work that we have done, for example, last year, HGZ Nederland said that through the EU Alliance for Mental Health, and I will mention it in a second, HGZ Nederland is following the European semester. For some years already, long-term care and health were addressed in the Netherlands country-specific recommendations. They made use of those recommendations alongside other major reports, for example, the OECD and WHO, in their own strategy to advise the Dutch government. And they told us that the recommendations strengthened their voice in promoting mental health care. They also noticed less of a focus on health and long-term care in recent years, but also acknowledged that it's perhaps the situation in the Netherlands has progressed following the reforms introduced. So this is a kind of positive example of how the European semester can be taken forward vis-a-vis kind of improving mental health care at national level. And as you can see here, EuroHealthNet, together with HGZ Nederland, which is actually a part of it as well, has been collaborating on the European semester and specifically mental health in a work and employment context. We are part of EU Alliance for Mental Health, work and employment, and in the recent years, it was our joint kind of decision to try to look into the European semester process from this perspective specifically. And last year we looked at the country-specific recommendations that were produced for all the member states, and you know, specifically to look at how, first of all, whether and how, if at all, it deals with mental health. And on the basis of that, we prepared recommendations that were sent to the European Commission representatives and also used with the members of the EU Alliance for Mental Health in the ongoing work at national level, but also at the EU level, to make sure and highlight the need of talking about the mental health dimension of employment, equal opportunities at the labor market, and work-life balance. You can see here a kind of summary of those recommendations. I did not put here a link to it, I believe, but I can maybe share it later through the Mental Health Europe. I also wanted to add that so EuroHealthNet works on the European semester not only with the EU Alliance for Mental Health. We are also part of another alliance, EU Alliance for Investing in Children, where we specifically focus on looking into how the recommendations at the national level have impact on the early childhood education and care, work-life balance, and so on and so forth, with the ultimate goal of improving the living conditions of the child population and their well-being. So that's maybe also an interesting angle to this process. This slide basically tries to summarize why we work on the semester and why evidence-based, this is always a kind of an important point for us, evidence-based advocating around this process matters. We think this is what we hear from our members, it supports and guides the work of our members at national, regional and local levels in regards to the reforms of health and social protection systems that are put forward, and also other key determinants of health. You've heard already a great deal about those before. It also guides the implementation and it kind of urges and accelerates the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights, and specifically in this regard, prioritization of health and social investments in the next EU long-term budget, and it's already present in the 2019 cycle. The European Semester 2019 includes an annex on cohesion policy investment priorities, which in our view indicates where the funding will go, and also what the language of potential projects that we might then want to look into may be. So this is just a quote from the Annual Growth Survey 2019 that indeed makes a link between the European semester and investment needs in each country, and how it's going to be potentially linked to the future EU funds, such as the European Regional Development Fund, the European Social Fund Plus, and the cohesion funds, and also a variety of other funds that we've been following. So how the engagement of us here from Brussels, but also our members at national level looks like. At the European level, we've been holding bilateral meetings with key units across the European Commission to bring our members' views. You can see here we've been working, of course, vis-a-vis the DG Employment, but also we've been working with DG Santé, DG Regio, DG Science and Innovation, and also recently we started looking into a new kind of potential angle for supporting our members' work on the ground, which is the European Commission Structural Reform Support Services that are able to provide technical and financial support to a variety of reforms at the national level. And in this regard, we focus, of course, on the health and social protection systems reforms. At national level, we've been encouraging our members to attend meetings on European semester, presentations of country reports and launch events for cohesion policy investment programming for the next period. Our members participated for wherever possible in those meetings in March and April. We managed to got our members engaged in that in Portugal, Latvia, Finland, Bulgaria, and Belgium. And we also plan for having our members involved in the fact-finding missions cycle 2020 that was already mentioned both by the European Commission representatives and Amana, and we plan to do it already between August and October. From year to year, we are trying to increase the number of countries we've been working with. So in 2018, we had 4 countries, the Netherlands, Slovenia, Sweden and Finland. In 2019, in addition to those 4 countries, we decided to focus on Portugal, Bulgaria and Latvia. And we are going to, in our 2019 report that we are in the process of preparing, we are going to specifically focus on those investment priorities that I just mentioned. And then for next year's cycle, we are trying to look into including a slightly different a group of countries, but everything will be based on the kind of initial evaluation and assessment of the social and health situation on the ground. I have 2 slides on our kind of initial take from the winter package 2019 launch. That's what I was kind of mentioned, asked to maybe prepare. Just very quickly, I will try to go through them. So maybe I'll just thinking about the time that we can maybe better use it. You will have the slides, of course, shared with you, so you can see it. We produced a statement and we shared it with the council configuration, so the member states representatives. We also sent it to various European Commission parts, Social Protection Committee, and so on and so forth. And we basically, maybe the 4th one is most interesting for you and also for us. The improvements have been observed regarding health system reforms in terms of better effectiveness, accessibility and resilience. However, we still see persisting inequalities both in health opportunities and outcomes. The life expectancy gains have slowed down, so we've been trying to kind of highlight it in our initial assessment, and the progress on healthy life expectancy has not caught up. The unmet need for medical care remains high, and actually for people living below the poverty line, it can be up to 5 times higher than for those who are in a better situation, and this includes children, as well as the ability to pay for such treatment and care. So you've heard Stefan talking about that there's only one indicator dedicated to health, and that's this one, the unmet need for medical care. He also mentioned that it's quite a subjective indicator. It's based on surveys. I don't think this indicator actually deals with, for example, unmet need for mental health medical care. It's a kind of quite broad and doesn't really go deeper and is able to unravel what's under it, and it doesn't show really the differences between the poor and the richer parts of the society. Right, and I have a couple of more points that you can also read later on. This is also interesting. The first one, all EU member states were identified with investment needs in the area of a more social Europe, and a vast majority of those countries were urged to invest in enhancing the equal and timely access to quality care and affordable services, and that includes access to healthcare. For us, it's important that it's primary care and preventative services, promoting social integration of people in a vulnerable situation, at risk of poverty and social exclusion, and that includes the most deprived and children. Inclusive, accessible and quality education, including early childhood education and care, and fostering active inclusion of migrants and marginalized groups. So for us, we really want to take the process further, looking at how it can improve the sustainability of the health and social protection systems and accessibility of it. Where's the the disease prevention and the health promotion in it, and how much money is going towards funding those services. We also focus on the social investments in this process, the innovative funding for health, social impact, outcome bonds, how this could complement the lack of insufficient health spendings. So that would be it. I think I will leave the time for questions if anybody will have. Okay, that's it. Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Why is this happening? There, yeah.
Yeah, sorry for this technical issue. Can they see me? Yeah. So we should nearly be there for my part of the presentation. There we are. They can see me or no? Okay. Well, you can hear my voice. My name is Laura Marchetti. I'm Senior Policy Officer at Mental Health Europe. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left. The webinar will have to end at 12. So I will try to be as brief as possible, but we will share these presentations with you along with the contacts of the speakers, and we have also prepared an additional PDF with relevant sources for you that you can go and check about the content of this webinar. So more information can come. My part of the presentation will be to kind of end and sum up how NGOs and civil society organizations, both at the national level and at the European level, can get involved in the process. So first of all, it might seem a bit silly to repeat this, but it's important to know the process and how it works, its timeline, who are the relevant actors, and to prepare ahead and also timely react when there is something coming out. As we've seen in these past 2 hours, this is it's a yearly process. So every year, more or less, the same type of event happen. So this is really also easy for it makes it easy for an organization to prepare in advance. Because usually the deadlines and the time of publication of certain documents are known ahead, so you can really prepare and also timely react when something is being published. It's important, of course, to read the documents and analyze them. In key documents are available both in English and in the national language. And as Amana was pointing out, many of the people that work on this process on a given country are fluent in the language of the given country, so you really don't have to be worried if you don't feel confident with English and you prefer to read and write in your own language, because this is actually foreseen as a part of this process. It's very important to know who are the people involved. Amana really well sum up who are the various actors from the Commission side. So you will have European semester officer in the delegation representing the European Commission in your own countries, but you also have desk officer here in Brussels. The toolkit prepared by EAPN provides actually a list of these people, which I've been hyperlinked to this slide, but will also be included in this PDF document that we have prepared. So You can go there, see where your country is, see the people who are following this process for your country, in your country and in Brussels, and get in touch with them. If you want to have more information about how EU institutions work and interact with each other, you can always consult our Keep in Mind guide. It's not specific to the European semester, but is more in general about advocacy at the EU level. And yet you can still find useful information there. So this will also be included in the PDF with the sources and resources. And I think it's also very much important to remember that you really have information as well. The EU institution, national institutions, social partners are very knowledgeable in their own field, and you as an NGO in a specific field are knowledgeable as well. So you can really have information and knowledge and expertise that can be used to feed into this process. One thing that could be done is to prepare analysis and assessment of certain documents once they're published, or prepare this information ahead. So prepare country sheets, for example, with data on your country, or fiches on a specific topic, such as mental health, or the access to mental health services in your country, and send these documents to the relevant people. You can share your messages with these stakeholders, of course, but also with the general public, with media, through social media, so also with people that might not even be aware that this process exists, and try to get them more aware, and also kind of spread the debate. You can invite key actors to your event to speak or participate. As you've seen, for example, what we have done today at MHE, we've invited the Commission and other NGOs that are very knowledgeable of this process, and we asked them to feed into this webinar and with their expertise. So you could do something similar with your own events. Sometimes this exchange of knowledge is actually very useful in terms of how to efficiently advocate and how to better collaborate with each other. You can participate in the stakeholder engagement and meetings. This has been mentioned a couple of times already. So, for example, when it comes to the country reports, for instance, the European Commission has meetings with governments and stakeholders both before the publication and after the publication. So certainly try to understand who are the people organizing this events, and how to be in the mailing list and invited at these events is already a big step forward, of course. And then attending these events prepared with a clear message and also clear recommendation and suggestion on what to put in the country reports, and how also the country reports, once they're published, what's good, I mean, what's relevant in there and what's maybe lacking. You can, of course, organize bilateral meetings, so face-to-face meetings, for example, your European semester officer, or you can also, if you're a part of a broader network, such as Mental Health Europe, you can get in touch with your broader network and ask to get in touch with the desk officer here in Brussels. So using your network of organization, both at the European and national level, can actually be a point of strength for your advocacy. And in case you're not a member of a network, as I think it has become clear, there are many organizations working on this topic, even from different perspectives. So getting in touch with them and try to create alliances would certainly help. One very quick last point that I think it's important to mention, if you will go in the country reports for this year, and this year only, you will find Annex D, which is on the investment guidance on cohesion policy funding 2021-2027. So, as you know, the European Commission, along with its member states, Parliament and Council, is rediscussing the EU budget for 2021-2027. And within this big EU budget, there is also the money that the EU is going to give to its member states for projects and programs. This Annex D has identified 5 policy objectives with the needs that the Commission thinks should be included in the discussion on how EU funding are going to be allocated at the national level. So it means that now the European Commission and your member state is going to start a discussion on how to spend this money based on the needs identified in this Annex D. So if you're following this, if you're following how your money are being spent, and if you think that your country needs money in a certain topic, such as, for example, access to community-based services or mental health reforms, this is a key moment where you can try to influence. And I'll give you an example in the next slide. So by an analysis that we have done of Annex D, we have seen that 14 countries have identified the institutionalization as a need. And you have the countries here. If you work on the institutionalization and the provision of community-based care, it means, and you are from Belgium or Finland or Lithuania, it means that the Commission is going to start a conversation with your country on whether and how use EU money to support the institutionalization and the development of community-based care. And if you work on this topic, this is an crucial moment for you to get involved and try to influence these negotiations. And this is just an example, of course. If you have a look at Annex D, they are not very long. There are just a few pages. I would really encourage you to read it and see what are the Commission priority for your own countries, because that's are gonna influence how money for the 2021-2027 period are gonna be spent. And this is the end of my presentation. I try to be as quick as possible, but if you have any question, you have there my email address. You're really more than welcome to contact me directly, and maybe we have time for a few questions, or we are really running out of time. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm really sorry that there is no time for questions. I would again invite you to write to us. There in this slide you have my email address. You can contact me directly in case you have any question for MHE. If you have any question for speakers, you can contact them directly, or you can contact us and then we will try to put you in touch. I really would like to thank you for the attendance to this this webinar. We are actually quite pleased to see that many people were interested, and it's clear that this topic is still a bit obscure for some, but is very much of relevance. And as we heard, Stefan, it will formally end in 2020, but it will continue in another form, which is probably not going to be so different. So although we are in 2019, this process as and the general framework will probably continue in the years to come. And we have seen now that there is a stronger correlation between the European semester and how funding are going to be spent. So I think this is going to increasingly make it relevant for more NGOs. And thank you very much again, and have a nice afternoon.